Hey, folks, got some special news for you. Sunset Lake CBD's biggest sale of the year is here. Start your Black Friday shopping early over at Sunset Lake and feel good about it, because when you purchase your favorite CBD products, you're also going to be supporting Planned Parenthood, a nonprofit organization that provides vital healthcare services and reproductive education to millions worldwide. Here's how it works. Starting today, Monday, November 13th, as of really 6 hours ago, all products at sunsetlakecbd.com will be 30% off with the code BF, as in BFD, but it's actually just BF.
Gotcha.
Because it's a BF deal, but it's also Black Friday. But that's not all. If you order over $125, you're going to be prompted to pick a free 20 count of your choice CBD gummies. That means you can get the Sleep CBD gummies. Oh, jeez. Or the Vibe gummies that have 1 milligram of THC and 30 milligrams of CBD. Again, Sunset Lake CBD is going to be donating 5% of all proceeds to Planned Parenthood, and we're going to match it at the Majority Report. Folks, first off, just do it for those. They had stopped with the Vibe gummies for a while, and it's back, though. Vibe gummies, 1 milligram THC. That would be the one that I would choose, but others can choose the Sleep with the melatonin, because those are great as well. Folks, 30% off. Their tinctures, their smokables, their keef, their pre-rolls, their fudge, their coffee, their salves, their lotion. I keep it right here when my calves get too dry. It's true. It's weird, but I don't know what to tell you. Sunset Lake CBD's biggest sale of the year, November 26th, ends November 26th, so do not wait. Head over to sunsetlakecbd.com. Take advantage of this deal. Help raise money for Planned Parenthood. Use the coupon code BF. You can see their website for terms and restrictions. But again, these guys are movement partners. They have donated thousands to things like strike relief funds and refugee resettlement and helping out with the flood relief up in Vermont, carceral reform. A great bunch of guys. And this is a great deal. If there's any product that you've ever thought about trying, now is the time to do it. Coupon code BF, sunsetlakecbd.com. All right. Now time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Monday, November 13th, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Malaika Jabali. On her book, It's Not You, It's Capitalism. Also on the program today, Shifa Hospital in Gaza no longer functioning. Meanwhile, the former head of Shin Bet, current ag minister in Israel, calls the current Israeli attack the second Nabka. The U.S. strikes eastern Syria. Israel bombs Hezbollah in Lebanon. 300,000 turn out in London to protest the Israeli attack on Gaza. 20,000 in Austin. Dozens of protests around the country, this country, calling for the president to call for a ceasefire and free Palestine. Meanwhile, back in D.C., we are 4 days away from a government shutdown, and Mike Johnson's junk is a mess.
In more ways than one.
Tim Scott drops out of the presidential debate just days after we were getting to know his girlfriend.
Yeah, he can spend more time with her now.
More time to travel to France. New report. Ukrainian special ops colonel was intricately involved in the Nord Stream sabotage. FBI seizes New York Mayor's Eric Adams' phone.
Wow.
And it wasn't because they think there's some malware on it. Big tech VC firm says massive investments in AI are contingent upon stealing billions of dollars of other people's labor. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. It is Monday.
Monday.
Emma Vigeland is here.
Yes.
Emma, do you have some news for us?
Yes. Over the weekend, I got engaged.
Well, there you go.
It was right after I left the show. So I got home and there were flowers everywhere and all that stuff. So I've been with my fiance now 7 years. I feel like I try to keep that stuff private. But now
from him, he was not aware.
He was not aware. But yeah. So it's been really a very overwhelming but wonderful weekend. Lots of family showed up. So thanks to everybody who said kind words online. That's really all I've got.
There you go.
And to all the fans who've written in and stuff, it's very sweet. So I really
congratulations.
appreciate that. Yeah, thank
you. We've all met the guy, and I think we approve. I don't want to speak for Matt and probably, but
all right. Well,
it was very appropriate.
He really should have called you first, honestly.
He did. I was just going to say, one of the things that really impressed me, I thought, when he called to ask for our permission, and that was great.
Yeah.
We thought, yes, he was a very
very respectful.
Yep.
Good.
He was a very respectful young man. So we were very pleased.
Thank you.
All right, let's get into this. Obviously, things continue unabated in Israel's assault on Gaza. They are now allowing for supposedly a 4-hour pause every day to allow people to escape northern Gaza. They are not allowing the Gazans to drive or to use any type of vehicles.
Yeah.
No cars, no bicycles. 6-year-old children, 75-year-old, 80-year-old grandmothers having to walk anywhere from 10 to 12 hours to get to safety.
People are likening it to the modern Trail of Tears.
And you're not allowed to stop. You're not allowed to look backwards on this trek. Reports of Israeli snipers, firing on hospitals. They are around the Shifa hospital. Israel is claiming that there is a big bunker underneath the Shifa hospital. There are varying reports on this. They have, provided supposedly the international community with documents to this effect. But in the past, we've seen them do this, and it turns out not the case. Folks online were citing things like when they had last year had claimed about 8 or 9 NGOs were terrorist organizations. They gave reams of documentation to the EU after basically attacking these organizations, and then months later, the EU decides no, there's nothing here. So very difficult to even make those assessments. Nevertheless, you've got people dying in this hospital because it's all basically completely dysfunctional now. And here is National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan on CNN's Dana Bash. And this is just, one of the things that Matt Duss, who was in visiting us maybe a week or two before this took place, has written, is that the Biden administration's months, almost years long attempt to sort of like establish the rules of international relations based upon in the justification for our support of Ukraine fighting back against Russian occupation and invasion. Matt Duss basically said, within a week or two of this conflict, everything they had worked on was up in flames. And here's another example of that.
So much for being here this morning. I just want to be clear. Does Israel need to do more to limit civilian casualties?
Well, first, Dana, every loss of innocent life, Palestinian, Israeli, anyone, is a tragedy, every single one. And we grieve for those who have been lost, those innocent lives who have been lost. At the same time, what Israel is facing is a terrorist enemy who hides among civilians, who uses civilians as human shields. And so it has an added burden of trying to prosecute this campaign against that terrorist group while distinguishing between terrorists and innocent civilians. And that doesn't lessen its responsibility to operate according to the rules of war. And we have continued to make that point both publicly and privately, and we will continue to do so as we go forward.
Is Israel operating according to the rules of war?
Well, Dana, I'm not going to sit here and play judge or jury on that question. What I'm going to do is state the principle of the United States on this issue, which is straightforward. Israel has a right, indeed a responsibility.
All right, just hold on for 1 second. How do you, you're stating a principle. You are obligated to do X. Are they doing X? Well, we're not in a position to assess.
Not my job.
Yeah.
It completely makes no sense.
What's the nature of obligation then?
Exactly. And also, if they're just as obligated to follow the rules of war, why are you prefacing it with any of this? Mm-hmm. You rarely hear anyone preface with actually the international laws that occupied people are allowed to basically practice any means necessary to fight the occupation. You don't hear that so much in the context of before someone refers to Hamas's obligations for humanity, and obviously, don't condone those tactics, don't condone the killing of civilians. But I'm just trying to say that we would never ever expect anyone to preface what they expect of Hamas in not killing civilians by saying, technically speaking.
Yeah. If Hamas is so the reason that Hamas should be condemned is because they target civilians, then that doesn't mean that killing them by also killing civilians is justified. Those are contradictory points if you're actually operating in a way that's consistent.
But just go back a little bit, because I want you to sort of just watch this turn when the most obvious question possible is being asked, which is, you've said that there's an obligation for essentially, a client state to uphold the rules of war, and then you can't make that assessment? Go ahead.
Well, first, Dana, every loss of innocent life, Palestinian, Israeli, anyone, is a tragedy, every single one. And we grieve for those who have been lost, those innocent lives who have been lost. At the same time, what Israel is facing is a terrorist enemy who hides among civilians, who uses civilians as human shields. And so it has an added burden of trying to prosecute this campaign against that terrorist group while distinguishing between terrorists and innocent civilians. And that doesn't lessen its responsibility to operate according to the rules of war. And we have continued to make that point both publicly and privately, and we will continue to do so as we go forward.
Is Israel operating according to the rules of war?
Well, Dana, I'm not going to sit here and play judge or jury on that question. What I'm going to do is state the principle of the United States on this issue, which is straightforward. Israel has a right, indeed a responsibility.
Just to be clear, the United States does not play the role of judge and jury as to whether other nations are engaged in a breach of the rules of war. For instance, let's say, when Russia invades Ukraine, the United States would never, ever make the assessment that, let's say, the Russian military has committed, I'm sorry, here it is, back in 2022. U.S. formally declares Russian military has committed war crimes in Ukraine. So apparently there is an ability for the U.S. to make this assessment.
Not if you're in the friend group, though.
I mean, that's the bottom line, is that there's just a huge steaming pile of horse crap that he's dishing up here.
Yeah.
And
aiding and abetting a deeply terrifying and, again, genocidal narrative about human shields, which continues to justify. That's a pop-up, I guess. Oh, it sounds beautiful. Just bring it down. Yeah. Dang, I lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
I don't know, the mind control music.
Okay, yeah, right. Now I suddenly approve of Israel's actions. But no, I mean, I joke. Obviously, what this does is it allows for the Israeli government to continue using this absolutely absurd on its face human shields justification. It's the ridiculous claims that they're making about the hospitals being Hamas command centers, essentially, is an extension of that. Bradley, actually, can you just pull up what I sent in Slack earlier, that old historical record of propaganda that has been used in the past for colonial ends? And we don't even maybe need to get to it right now because I know we have a guest, but this historian, it's really quick, a professor at Edinburgh put this up, and I think it's instructive. The bombardment and siege of hospitals accusing the colonized of shielding behind medical facilities has a long history. This is an Italian fascist propaganda trying to justify the targeting of the medical structures of the International Committee of the Red Cross in Ethiopia. And you can just see here how older right-wing propaganda, from around 100 years ago, using that same playbook. And that thread has a few more examples. But the United States, in its lack of consistency on this and its complete hall pass for the Israeli government to continue in their atrocities, they're just furthering old fascist tropes.
We'll obviously talk more about this later in the program. In a moment, we're going to be talking to Malaika Jabali, senior news and politics editor at Essence Magazine, author of It's Not You, It's Capitalism, Why It's Time to Break Up and How to Move On. First, a couple of words from our sponsors. There's some things you can go to your friends for advice on, but not really for health advice. There's only so much of your own research you can do. Ritual takes the guesswork out of the vitamin game. Their multivitamin for men is based on science to help fill common nutrient gaps in the diet and level up your nutrient goals. It's an all-around win. This stuff is great. For me, the big thing is, it's very hard to know where what vitamins are actually quality and where they're sourced, and where they're sourced is really a huge part of it. That's one of the best things about Ritual, is that you know where your vitamins are coming from, where they get them from, like literally geographically, and this is important. There are certain places that have used certain agricultural products and don't necessarily have the same regulations and requirements, and so Ritual takes that guessing game, takes that guessing part out of the game. The other part is they also send it to you on a regular basis. And so for me, whenever I've tried to take a multivitamin in the past, I get through the first bottle and then I forget, and then I get out of the habit, and then I'm back to day one. But the best thing for me is that my my vitamin D levels. I just went to go see the doctor.
Nice.
He said my blood work was good. Yep.
In the winter.
Well, it's also important to me all the time because I spend all the time inside.
Oh.
But it is scientifically developed multivitamin, high quality, key ingredients, clean, bioavailable forms. Ritual is your new type of two-a-days, from helping support heart health with omega-3 DHA to normal muscle function and normal immune function with vitamin D3. This small step can have a major impact. And again, it's made traceable because where your nutrients come from is just as important as what they're for. It's vegan friendly. It is non-GMO. It is sugar-free. It is gluten-free. It is major allergen-free. And their capsule has a delayed release designed to make it gentle on an empty stomach, which is also really key because when you have to wait until you eat to take your multivitamins, then you forget, and then you're again. That's the whole thing. Make it a habit. Make it an easy one. They got a minty essence in every bottle, helps keep things fresh, helps make taking your multis every day actually enjoyable. And they've got it for, different stages of life. I'm at the far end of the spectrum, the above 50. What are you going to do? Essential for Men is a quality multivitamin from a company you can actually trust. And get this, Ritual is offering my listeners 30% off during your first month. Visit ritual.com/majority. Start Ritual or add Essential for Men to your subscription today. That's 30% off. Ritual.com/majority. Also, one more sponsor for today's show. I use this product regularly. I mean, honestly, I got to figure out a way of carrying it around with me because there have been multiple occasions where I'm like, how did I not do this? And like the other night, I met my girlfriend. We went for a dinner thing. And
is this Zbiotics?
Yes.
I could have used that last night.
There you go. You forget. She bought some. And I'm like, how did you not bring me it? But I don't know. We got into a fight. Anyways, the point is, if the day after drinking is sometimes a problem for you, well, there's a solution. It's called Zbiotics. Zbiotics is a pre-alcohol probiotic. It's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. And here's how it works. For a long time, I thought that the reason why I didn't feel good the next day was because of dehydration. That is not it. You may get dehydrated, but that is not it. It's a byproduct, a toxic byproduct that alcohol creates in your gut. And what Zbiotics pre-alcohol probiotic does is it produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. It's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut where you need it the most. So all you got to do is just remember to drink Zbiotics before drinking alcohol. That's actually the hardest part of this whole thing. That's the only hard part. Sometimes I forget.
Yeah.
You drink responsibly, get a good night's sleep, you'll feel great the next morning. You want to go to work and do a podcast, you can do it. Mm-hmm. You want to work out, you can do it. It makes a big difference. Go to zbiotics.com/majority. Get 15% off your first order when you use majority at checkout. You can also sign up for a subscription using our code so you can stay prepared no matter the time or the occasion. Zbiotics is backed with a 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they're going to refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, head to zbiotics.com/majority. Use the code majority at checkout, 15% off. Thanks for Zbiotics for sponsoring this episode and for making it easier for me to actually do my job on many occasions in the past. Just remember, we'll put the podcast, the links in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. Be right back. When we come back, we'll be talking to Malaika Jabali, senior news and politics editor at Essence Magazine, author of It's Not You, It's Capitalism, Why It's Time to Break Up and How to Move On. We are back, Sam Seder, on the Majority Report with Emma Vigeland. Real pleasure to finally welcome to the program Malaika Jabali, senior news and politics editor at Essence Magazine, author of It's Not You, It's Capitalism, Why It's Time to Break Up and How to Move On. Malaika, welcome to the show. Long overdue.
I know. Hi, Sam and Emma. I'm surprised it's been this long.
It's been too long. You were too busy doing your book for a long time.
Yeah, that did take up. That's a valid reason.
It is a valid reason.
But now we get to talk about it.
Great
so.
to
I
know. So congrats on the book. Let's just start. Like, who is your audience for this book?
I say that it's people who are socialish and not quite committed to being socialist. So folks who are like, I know that there are some fundamental problems with capitalism. I know I'm not getting paid as much as I need to be. I feel like I've done everything right and I still can't get ahead. I still feel unhappy in some way. And they can recognize that there's racism. They can recognize that there's class issues. They know that corporate bosses can be an issue, but they don't quite have the language to identify what that is. So I'm pulling people who are kind of on the edge and saying, okay, here's an alternative. And, I think a lot of those people are younger people. It's Gen X, it's Gen Z, it's millennials. So it is definitely geared towards my peers and a little bit younger.
The book reminds me of two different, or broadly speaking, there was that book that He's Just Not That Into You,
right?
Where it was sort of like a way of like convincing you that like you need to move on. But also Nomadland. We interviewed the author of that book, which talked about, which is basically ethnography about people's experience in the wake of the financial crisis, and the idea that so many people had that my situation, loss of a home, whatever is a function of something that I did, as opposed to something more systematic. Talk about a little bit about like that sort of like that aspect of, before we get to the sort of he's just not that into you type of thing. but talk about that aspect of like how our system is designed to obscure the structural issues that leave people where they are.
It's through a lot of propaganda, so the structures are created. And then when people rise up to say something about it, there is a whole legal apparatus. There's a policy apparatus. There's a police state that then says, oh, you actually can't talk about it this way. We'll malign you if you think about it in these terms. And so it's really interesting that you mention the Great Recession, because I would say that is when it crystallized for me that I was analyzing things through a Marxist take on what was happening, and I identified with it. So I officially became socialist during the Great Recession. I had thought about the ills of capitalism, but it was very historical. It was very abstract. I was looking at the ways that exploiting Black labor, exploiting indentured servants, exploiting wage laborers in the North, the colonization of the Native Americans all made me realize that capitalism was fundamentally built on exploitation and unfairness and immorality. in many ways. But I didn't quite identify as anything else. I just knew that this was a problem. But having that personal experience and saying, okay, my family, for instance, was targeted with a subprime loan. There weren't any reasons why we should have gotten it other than the fact that you had a whole bunch of lenders who said, this is an easy target. These are easy targets. And because I had already had a lens of looking at systematic issues just through my studies and environment and upbringing, I was like, I know it's not just me. And then you study more and you realize this is happening to a whole zip code, whole communities, neighborhoods, the country. And so through that, it was like, okay, we need to let other people know that it is not just their responsibility for making it in a society that was not intended for the average person to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, to return to what Sam was saying about almost the construction of your book as being directed towards people and their feelings. It's time to break up. It's okay to feel okay about breaking up with capitalism. Like, there's so much shame that is internalized, I think, on a day-to-day basis, whether it's if you're struggling with student loan debt, if you were targeted by a predatory loan, if, you're not able to make your car payments and things like that. And I really appreciate how you focus on trying to debunk those myths, because it can really, I think, liberate people from that shame and then get them to start thinking less about, oh, I am in some way not living up to this impossible standard. And then you can liberate people and they can start thinking about these structures more broadly.
Right. And I'm really glad that you guys have pointed that out, because I've recognized, I think, in talking about the book, that it is very personalized. Like, it's intended for individuals to kind of wake up and raise their consciousness, which is kind of at odds with a structural analysis, right? Like, we're talking about these larger problems, but I feel like a lot of texts will break down the problems, but how can we allow people to relate to that information? Like, we can break down capitalism all day. We can break down the wealth gaps all day. We can break down the disparity in income inequality and wealth inequality and how much corporate bosses have been making off the backs of workers. But I think people needed to feel that. And we do have, and I think this is also about empowerment. Like, we do have a say in how this goes, and we can elect those people who then make those kinds of structural and policy changes.
Let's talk about sort of some of the sort of the direct impact, the sort of, I guess, the examples that you use that resonate with folks similarly situated, right? I mean, there are some, like you say, you can talk about sort of more abstract things. You really focus on student debt, because I think one of the statistics that you drop, the student debt in the U.S. is higher than the total wealth held by the entire bottom 50% of the U.S. And I mean, it's just an astonishing figure. That and how much it has. I mean, what's your sense in terms of like what happened over the past couple of years in terms of like there was an influx of support for Americans for like over the course of a brief window over the course of part of COVID, and then it was just sort of like summarily goes away. The moratorium on student debt repayments, support for people with children just goes away with a whimper, as it were. What's your sense of how people react to that?
How people are reacting to
how that implicates
tapering with that. I think we lose direction. It's easy for us to get lost and mired in our own problems, and I think that takes a lot of activism. That kind of pressure on an administration takes work, and there are groups doing that work. So I interviewed somebody named Astra Taylor, who's a part of the Debt Collective, a founder of the Debt Collective. And so she's been activating around this and also negotiating with the Biden administration. And I think it speaks to another aspect of the book, which is why I try to steer clear of partisanship, because both parties are liable in this big mess that capitalism has created. And they've both been involved in not mitigating the impacts on everyday people. And so what happens with politics is, I think with anything else, your party wins and there's less incentive to actually put pressure on the government. So even though people said, oh, we're going to push Biden left and we're going to do all these things, that's really hard for some people to do, because then there's more strategizing involved. Well, we want to negotiate with him behind the scenes, and we want to, people are trying to get the little wins and the things for, maybe their institutions or their organizations. And so it just gets atomized. And so I think beyond student loan debt, because that is a federal issue, there has to be a move towards local and grassroots politics. And then also Republicans distracted from, a lot of that work by having us talk about phantom issues, critical race theory, for instance, which is a niche topic in law schools, or trans issues, or what's happening in schools. So we get distracted, I think, in part because of, right-wing agenda. And then we just put less pressure on our team when they're in office.
Let's talk about that sort of like that moment that I think, your book is trying to achieve, where, you realize that capitalism is just not that into you type of situation. Like how does one, is it, and I think at one point you in the book, you say that this is not necessarily about a lack of imagination, but isn't it? I mean, just talk about that for a moment. Like the idea of envisioning, and certainly in my generation, the era I grew up in, conceiving of a socialist society was just sort of, there was no discussion of it. There was no visions of it. I'm technically Gen X, but at the tail end, or the front end, I guess. But the point being that there just wasn't a lot. It really did feel like a lack of imagination. Is that still the case, do you think, or no?
I think it's mostly political will. I think, especially because the book isn't saying, okay, this whole government is going to be socialist overnight. And if you look at the readings of socialist activists and philosophers and government officials, they were still trying to figure out what that looks like. So I think it would take a lot of imagining and conversation and practice to figure out what that could look like, especially in a world where we know socialists are maligned and killed, and there have been coups against socialist governments. So putting that aside, that yes, there will take some imagination, I think, to get into the specifics, there are a lot of basic things that socialists have lobbied for that have been around for about a century. Universal healthcare, single payer healthcare is not a new topic. This is something that came up in the early 1900s under the Truman administration. And even then you had business interests who lobbied together to say, this is going to affect our bottom line. You had the insurance companies who realized that this could be something that should go into the private sector instead of being a public sector issue. So things like that, thinking about free college tuition, that's not new. We had it in so many states, but then state governments, like with healthcare, they realized that, we're starting to integrate. So we need to figure out a way to privatize so that we are not, so that we can keep these goods, we can keep this common good for certain amounts of people. And those people tended to be white. So people didn't want to share with Black people. And so that's how we ended up retracting from a lot of these public services. Something that I argue in the book is that having the government do things is not socialist in and of itself. It's maybe arguably not socialist at all, because you see it in capitalist countries, but socialists have been the ones at the forefront of those movements. And we can at least get back to having some basic necessities.
I think it's also just about removing points of leverage from capitalists and from people in the private sector. Like when you mentioned their education, the privatization of that, the privatization of our healthcare, those are all things that, when they're decommodified, people are able to kind of live their lives more in the way that they want to, as opposed to if you lose your job, your healthcare is gone. Or, if you don't like your job, well, you have to pay back your student loans because you're so deeply in debt. You're going to stay in this position. And I think that's what makes it so difficult to disentangle. Because the powerful really want to keep those leverage points.
You're absolutely right, Emma. And even this idea of having, an American dream through home ownership, that means you have to stay sedentary. Can people really go on strike if they have to pay a mortgage? People may not mind being evicted in a place where, they might have a 6-month or 1-year lease, but you have a mortgage. You're tied to these people until it's paid off or you sell it. So how committed are we going to be even to movement work if we're so bogged down with these paying for things that are necessary for our survival? So that's absolutely, correct. And this is why we have big corporations who fight so hard against it, even though it is not like an orthodox socialism. It's taking so many of our goods out of the private sector, out of the financialization sector. So they're having a fit. And so I think, it's something that it's important to recognize.
I think that's the same dynamic too with healthcare. Even on a bottom financial level, removing that obligation from employers would be helpful in terms of like just the sheer sort of financial transaction involved. But it would also cede a lot of control over workers that they don't want to necessarily cede. Let's talk about the relationship between capitalism and race. You talk about the Black radical tradition in the book. How does that interplay work?
I think it's crucial. I think it's so important that I had it in this second chapter, and it's something that we debated. My editor and I, we went back and forth with, just to give people a little background. The first chapter is on capitalism, just the basics of what it looks like, who are capitalists. The second chapter is on race and class through clever references and memes and things like that. And then the third chapter is also kind of an introductory chapter, just looking at what does it mean to be socialist? What has socialism looked like? What are socialist projects kind of around the world? What have they looked like? And so for me, integrating a specific race and class chapter was crucial, on top of weaving it in throughout the book for a couple of reasons. One of them being, I'm thinking of part of the audience here are my girlfriends. It's the Black women like me who feel like we've made it, but people are struggling to say that they are looking at an alternative system because to them, capitalism means prosperity. Capitalism means, I've sacrificed all this, so why are you trying to take it away from me now when we've been held back from really prospering, like as Black women, as Black people in this society? We should support Black-owned businesses. So this was a way to talk to my homegirls and say, okay, this is actually what capitalism means, and it doesn't mean that you can't live well. Socialism is about more people living well. It's about the masses living well. While capitalism does the opposite. It focuses a lot of the wealth and prosperity in the hands of a small few, a relatively small few. And if you look at the origins of capitalism, we would not have had it without, again, the enslavement of Black labor, the pillaging of the indigenous. The reasons why so many of the programs that we don't have right now have not prospered or lasted that long is because elected officials used race as a wedge. It was actually astonishing to me how much of the healthcare fight and the anti-healthcare fight throughout the entire 20th century was fear-mongering that communism on one hand and integration on the other would be combined with healthcare. And so if you actually give healthcare to everybody, including Black people, you would destroy the lives of white people because at the time, eugenics was still a big issue. And so the rhetoric around it, the propaganda, the flyers, the brochures from the American Medical Association, the speeches that one of the chapter leaders was telling amongst his, fellow peers was that, this thing could keep Black people healthy and we don't want to do that because that would threaten the white race. I learned so much more about the linkages between healthcare and some of these other issues, or even student loan debt. Again, as I mentioned, without that threat of integration, we probably, or people being upset about the threat of integration, we probably would still have cheap tuition today. So it's so integral in how capitalism has been able to survive.
And I should also say, in the context of student debt, Black women in particular have a really disproportionate share of that student debt, particularly from for-profit universities that where people feel like they've bumped up against some type of glass ceiling without a degree, go and expend all this money to presumably further their career, and it really just ends up being just debt. We've talked a lot about that in the past. So, all right, so you're at that point where there's an awareness that like this is a structural problem. This isn't just me. What do people do like tangibly speaking? Like is there value in electing the closest to the sort of like or the person who espouses more than the other person of these sort of like socialistic policies? How do we proceed in a sort of like a tangible way?
I think that can be a slippery slope. So I steer clear of electioneering in the book. I think that there is power in mass movement and mass organization, where you're enabling people to find a community who can then put demands and strategize together about what they want to do moving forward. I think, of course, all of this is impacted by policy. Policy creates a lot of these problems, but directly trying to figure out who's, the lesser of two evils, this is where it's brought us. So I focus on people joining something. If you've got a union, join that. If you need to have one, unionize. There are, for instance, with the Debt Collective, as I mentioned, it's a debtors union. So they do advocacy work, and they're also working to give people, tangible results so that they can combat the student loan debt that they personally have. So that's considered, they consider that a debtors union. Join an organization. I think capitalism does a really great job, again, of isolating us and making us think these are all of our individual problems and our individual failings. But when you are in concert with other people, it eases some of that burden, and it also empowers you to fight. So joining, you got to join something. I think that's a very easy step. And there are so many groups right now that are getting involved in a lot of different kinds of work that you can find, if there's anything you care about, the climate, if you care about student loans, if you care about, having healthcare, a lot of them lean left. And so there are so many ways that you can move forward through an organization.
And then what follows that? I mean, it just we cede that to the organizations in terms of like rallying for certain issues. Are they is it on an issue by issue basis, or are we looking for more sort of like broader, I guess, all in type of reform or change?
I think all of the above. So if we just look at, as one example, the Black Panther Party, they weren't just a community-based organization. They also had a political and philosophical project that they were working on, right? And they also made sure to have services for the community, because you can't just go around with all this theory and then people are like, okay, well, how are you actually going to help me in my day-to-day life? And you have nothing to offer them. So I think those kinds of organizations are important, where you're able to think about the ideological underpinnings. I think that's so crucial, but you're also doing some work. So the Black Panther Party decided at one point that they were going to be involved in politics. So I don't think it necessarily means rallying around a particular candidate, though it could be if that, this is all democratic. Socialism is about democracy. So if that's what people decide, then that's what they decide. But I think just looking at the patterns of how some of these groups have worked, elect your own candidates. Figure out how those political processes work. Decide, okay, do you want to be on the Democratic ballot? Do you want to be independent? See what works in that particular group that you're in. I have been involved in an organization called Operation Power. We do all the, hoity-toity, book readings and political education, but we also elect officials who are socialist or radical or progressive in some way. And so we have to understand, what does gathering petitions look like? Going to the train stations, getting people to get your candidate on the ballot, and then saying, okay, well, which party should they be on? What do people respond to in this community? And we could get, as nitty gritty as you want to. We could get nitty gritty, you know what I mean? It is about coming up with a platform and then saying, okay, who exactly are we going to be choosing for this? Or are we going to abstain from this particular election? So you can elect candidates, and you can also figure out a strategy for people who align with your agenda and endorsing certain candidates. But I do think that political piece is important, like getting involved in politics in some way, even though I'm not, promoting, endorsing any particular party.
I remember a piece that you wrote that really stuck with me. Obviously, and I think it was back in like 2017 about in Milwaukee. I think it was looking at black voters who had stayed home in the 2016 election. I can't remember where it.
That current affairs.
Was it in current affairs? Okay.
Oh, nice.
And I wonder, like, what give me your sense of how you reach folks like that and convince them that engaging has any value, because there is a sense that, like, sort of, and I think it's not specific, to black communities in Milwaukee. I mean, I think this is the case. I remember years ago, during the Bush years, seeing a documentary where, somebody was talking about how, like, the Walmart is destroying all the things. And somebody said, well, why don't you get involved with this? It's like, what does politics got to do with this? I mean, and this was in a rural area, with some, rural white folk. I mean, how do you convince people who feel like there is no point to engaging in any of this, regardless of whether it's electoral politics or, for that matter, like organizing around a union, for that matter? And I think certainly the union stuff is, like, picked up steam because you can't avoid sort of seeing how empowered it is. But what is the what's the mechanism to get people to see that their actions can have some impact?
That's a great question. And I think part of it is not putting that responsibility on people to feel like everything that they get involved in has to have an impact. But I think they need to see somebody aligning with them making an impact. So if, again, we go back to the Black Panther Party, that didn't start off with some real deep ideological, analysis of the lumpen proletariat. There were community folks who said, we need a stop sign because too many kids are getting run over on this block. And they put a homemade stop sign up there, and eventually the city came around. And so once people observe that the folks who are involved are making a difference, I think you inspire people to get involved. There are some people who may not ever care. There are some people who are too tired. We're working 3, 2, 3, 4 jobs. People have side hustles. They're told they need to be working all these jobs in order to make a living. And so I don't think the onus should be on every single person to have to pick up, the mantle and do something. But I do think you can win people over to at least say, hey, let me check out a meeting because I know this group is doing something and I'm seeing the results of that. And that doesn't necessarily have to be, like you said, it doesn't have to be an electoral win. It could just be something for the community. We've been trying to get speed bumps in this neighborhood for so long. Who's doing something about it? And people will complain. And then you'll have the few at the vanguard who are like, okay, we actually want to do something about it. It's like, okay, let me rock with you, So you'll win people over even if everyone's not going to be deeply involved in the movement. That's just not how movements have worked. But you'll at least get people to align and support. And they might go to, the polls if they see one of your candidates is doing something.
I noticed too how, just to take it out of the U.S. context for a bit, that you do try to make your case to take it to a global scale, right? I mean, you center or you open your second chapter talking about Evo Morales, or has a quote from him in there, if I'm not mistaken. Why was that so important for you to make that case and not keep it confined to domestic politics in the U.S.?
Well, I started off wanting to do more internationally. But I also know, I hate to say it like this, but a lot of us only care about what's happening within our borders. Like we can be a little bit ignorant and we don't really see the connections abroad. But I think there are good examples outside of the U.S. context, and not just for looking at capitalism's failures, but looking at worker movements, looking at how people have had fundamentally different values than Western ones. Like the U.S. is based on individualism. That's a Western and European ideal. But there are some communities who have thought about communal values for eons. In Bolivia, part of their constitution is based on this idea of collectivism. In a lot of West African countries really all over, they believe in collectivism. And so I think it allows us to step outside of this trope that it's human nature to be selfish. It's human nature to only want to look out for yourself. Of course, capitalism works because it's a reflection of how we all are. Capitalism works because it has, in large part, killed off opposition. It works because it has propagandized us out of alternatives. It has focused so much on the fact that this is an innate idea that's natural and works, instead of something that is built on exploitation and clear policy, distinct policy that has kept us thinking this way. And so when you look outside of this Western bubble, you realize that everybody isn't doing this way, and they haven't always done it this way.
Malaika Jabali, senior news and politics editor at Essence Magazine. The book is It's Not You, It's Capitalism, Why It's Time to Break Up and How to Move On. Thanks so much for coming on. We'll put a link to the book at majority.fm. Hope to have you back very soon. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So good to be here.
Thanks so much.
All right, folks. I'm going to head into the fun half of the program.
What's cool about the book too is it's like lots of graphics, stuff that you can it's a really good introductory kind of capitalist critique. Not saying it's rudimentary in any way, but just the fact that it's so visual, I think, is really
accessible.
Helpful.
Yeah, it's a good like coffee table book that people might be able to you can just sort of page it open and there's a little like sections. The design is really great.
Folks, just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only support the show and help us survive and thrive, but you get the free show free of commercials. You get the fun half. You get to IM us during the fun half. All sorts of benefits. So check that out. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, including the Majority Report blend. Wow. Yes. It's a delicious blend, medium roast of coffee. You can get others, but always start with a Majority Report blend and then work your way into other ones if you need be. Marble Gallery on the IM says, I have some extra money this month. I'd like to donate it to help the people in Gaza. I'm aware of Doctors Without Borders, but can you recommend anyone else? Thanks in advance. Also, congrats, Emma, on your engagement.
Oh, thank you.
We had that list that Hassan Piker was donating to at the beginning of the Israeli strikes, and maybe we can repost that on the blog and in the podcast and YouTube description. But the trouble is, right now, is that there's no money going to get into Gaza. When we were talking to Just Coffee and thinking about who we wanted to contribute to, I think the real time to really provide those funding is going to be in the coming months to Gaza. But certainly, Doctor Without Borders, they're doing great work there to the extent that they can at this point. It's just
we should do eventually, I think, maybe some sort of stream. Sun's out, guns out, kind of deal.
Exactly.
But as you say, like, it's just the bombardment right now. the number one thing that needs to happen is to stop the bombing. I mean,
the thing I really
Jewish
appreciate
Voice
about
for Peace is a great organization that, you know, you can help fund their actions right now. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Is it the question is like, what's the most helpful right now? Is it attempting to get aid in there? Because I don't know that you're going to do that. One of the things I like about Doctors Without Borders is that not only are they actually like on the ground providing aid, but they're also there's been, a lot of very strong testimony from them once, about their colleagues there, and that I think help in terms of world opinion.
I mean, that's an organization. I went back into the bombing in Afghanistan of a Medicine Sans Frontiers hospital, and like they're empowering that organization, I think, is a good thing.
Yeah.
The type of things that they put up with.
That's been
Doctors Without Borders, and they just had this really strong statement about what's happening there too. I mean, they're heroes. You played that when I was out, right? That interview with the nurse. It's deeply depressing to me that it seems like you can only get these voices out there when they're white or Western, but like, I mean, at least people are starting to figure it out.
Do what happens. Like, I mean, Avi Shlaim mentioned this in one of his books, where it's like it's sad that like the sort of seal had to be broken with regards to like the Nakba by Israeli historians saying like, actually this is true, but it did ultimately have a positive effect where you're able to see more Palestinian voices following that because it was basically co-signed by Israeli historians. And I think all of this speaking out, and I'm glad the extent that we've had Palestinians on this program and on Left Reckoning, and I think everybody's voice is, I think, needed at this moment.
Emma, what's happening on ESPN?
Well, we'll be recapping another exciting NFL week. Again, we'll be announcing the punishment for either myself or Bradley when we which one of us loses the competition that we're doing right now. But yeah, I mean, Giants tanking, Lions are legit, CJ Stroud, more victory laps on there, and the 49ers are back, and the Vikings Cinderella story just keeps on rolling. YouTube.com/ESPN show at 4 p.m. Yes, it's very fun. You should. It's a good time to get back into Minnesota.
I don't know if it's ever. I think that means I'm too late.
Well, so I mean, they're Kirk Cousins for his Achilles, and they traded for this guy Josh Dobbs, and he's just like this complete Cinderella story quarterback. Yeah, okay. It's really sweet. Anyway, Left Reckoning.
Left Reckoning. Dave Griscom and I finished our reading of the Communist Manifesto. We did part 3 and chapters 3 and 4 of that. Check that out. And yeah, we played a clip. Actually, we'll play it in the fun half, but I have a new favorite song. It's a little bit late for the song of the summer, but it's a song to bosses. But yeah, patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get access to that.
I saw you there. I saw you.
What is
post
it?
Part of that.
You have to check out in the fun half, folks.
We're going to play it in this half?
Is it Richmond, north of Richmond 2.0?
No.
It's my version of Richmond, north of Richmond.
Okay, good.
I saw that.
So hopefully the next
song.
Democratic debate, they open
Who
20
was
minutes
that?
on this.
Mark Ribole, I think is how you pronounce his name. Some people call him Loop Daddy on TikTok.
Can you believe that the frickin' I know that you're talking about something else, but like, I'll never get over sitting there when we watched that first debate and seeing that they opened the first 20 minutes of the Republican debate centered around the song Rich Men North of Richmond.
Yeah.
Our society is rotted to its core.
We've got some problems.
Yeah.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920 is the number. We have not turned on the phones yet, but we will see you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it to my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder, what a fucking nightmare.
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them, just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males.
Psych. Fuck them. Fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what? A hell of a lot